Rowan Park didn't bring her laptop to the Integrity Summit. She brought a paper notebook with coffee rings on the cover and a black pen that sometimes skipped on the downstroke. After 19 years inside Helix Meridian, a logistics and finance octopus that wrapped itself around warehouses, carriers, and invoices, Rowan had learned that the meetings with the loudest titles were usually the least interested in the truth. Paper helped her remember what mattered. At 9:17 a.m., 3 minutes before the cameras went live, the new acting COO, Bianca Miles, fresh from a consulting firm that sold reinvention in slide decks of 50, tapped the mic. The theater's lights dimmed. Helix's logo pulsed across a wall of glass like a heartbeat forced to perform. "Good morning, builders," Bianca said, and the word builders sounded like a borrowed sweater she'd forgotten to take the price tag off. Rowan sat in the fourth row, aisle seat, the way she always sat. She didn't like being hemmed in, she liked exits. Beside her, Noel, younger by a decade, once her shadow on midnight releases, breathed shallowly. Rowan noticed how Noel's hands worried the edge of a program until confetti bits of paper fell like snow into her lap. Bianca launched into the ritual: margins, efficiency, modernization, stakeholder trust. The words slid across the room like polished stones, pretty and frictionless. Halfway through a sentence that introduced a reimagined leadership lattice, Bianca glanced at the teleprompter, then smiled a smile that belonged on a billboard. "Some of you will move into new chapters," she said. "Some chapters we will close today." The room stiffened. Helix Meridian is sunsetting the role of principal systems weaver. She said it without looking at anyone. Effective immediately. Rowan felt the attention shift like a tide turning, not toward her, superstitiously but away from her, as if the entire row had agreed on an instinct. "Don't look, don't get caught in the undertow." Noel's knee bumped Rowan's, then stayed pressed there, apology by contact. A security contractor in a navy blazer appeared at the end of the aisle, not menacing, just present like a punctuation mark. Bianca kept smiling. "We celebrate the tenure of our colleague who has served. There will be generous separation provisions." She looked down. The teleprompter scrolled. "Rowan Park, please see HR." It didn't sting the way a slap stings. It was colder than that, like the sensation when a dentist touches the nerve under your tongue with a metal instrument and a noise happens inside your bones. Rowan stood. She left the program on the seat and the pen cap on the floor. She didn't take the aisle at first. She stepped into the row and made the small courtesies of a lifetime sorry, thanks, excuse me, between knees and handbags and the glow of phones pretending not to record. Noel's hand touched her forearm and then retreated. At the top of the aisle, the contractor in navy didn't reach for her, just nodded once, grateful for an easy task. Bianca said something about a new platform, about partnerships that demanded agility. Applause, because people clap when they don't know what else to do. Rowan reached the doors and didn't push through. She turned and took one last look at the stage. She thought of the first month she'd been asked to salvage a dying platform here, when Helix wasn't Helix yet, just a cluttered hive with too many chiefs and not enough maps. She thought of pallets in Fresno sweating under broken refrigeration, of a blood pressure medication that almost didn't arrive, of a truck on I-35 that hit black ice and needed a paperwork miracle if a hospital in Tulsa wasn't going to run dry by morning. She had built a system to hold those kinds of stories together. She pushed through the doors. In the corridor, the light was honest. No stage gel, just sun off the atrium. The contractor walked a half-step behind her, like a shadow you could dismiss if you walked fast enough. HR was down a staircase, across a bridge over a rectangle of ornamental water where koi drifted like thoughts you couldn't quite catch. The world had the nerve to keep being pretty. Rowan didn't ask for time to collect herself, because the contingency had never lived in HR's calendar. It lived in a contract. 5 years ago, when Helix's internal politics had begun to eat their own tail, Rowan had done something no one in a room like this ever expects from someone who can read a shell script and a balance sheet. She created an LLC, low, simple capital letters on a state website at midnight, and she named it Latticebridge. Latticebridge contracted with Helix to license a data integrity relay she'd conceived on a bus ride between warehouses in Ontario. Not a product, not a dashboard, a loom. She called it the Aegis Loom because the image that came to her wasn't plumbing or pipes, it was threads, compliance threads, fraud detection threads, timing threads from carriers and customs and banks, running through a frame that held tension just right. Give a thread too much slack and it snarls, pull it too tight and it snaps. The loom heard both dangers and tuned the tension. It sat between systems without announcing itself, validated what people believed they were seeing, and, when it had to, refused to let a lie pass. Helix didn't own the loom. Helix licensed the loom under a term sheet that took her 3 months and 2 pro bono conversations with a friend of a friend to write. The term sheet looked unremarkable. She made it boring on purpose. It said the loom would run as a service furnished by Latticebridge and billed monthly against a base plus usage. It said the loom could be withdrawn without penalty if Helix committed a material breach of good faith collaboration, a phrase you could drive a truck through if you weren't careful. It defined good faith with footnotes and examples. It defined withdrawn in careful, civil, regulator-proof terms. The service would enter attestation mode, read-only and audit-heavy, for no fewer than 90 days, preserving the integrity of records while refusing to validate any new commitments that could harm consumers, clients, drivers, or counterparties. No fireworks, no lockouts, no gotcha. Attestation mode was a seatbelt that stiffened the instant the car decided you'd hit something. Rowan had never mentioned the loom in Helix's public decks, not because she was hiding, because the loom's job was to notice, not to show off. After it saved a chain of oncology drugs from vanishing into a paperwork sinkhole in Chile, no one asked who had done the saving. After counterfeit bolts headed for a wind farm failed a provenance check before a crane ever lifted them, no one asked who had pulled the thread. It was better that way. Rowan did not mind being the quiet person in a room who knew where the trapdoors were. But she did mind this, being told on camera that the thread didn't exist. At HR, a young man with a haircut that made him look like an apology wearing a tie tried not to meet her eyes as he slid a manila envelope across the table. "We appreciate your service," he said, which is a phrase that never means what it should. When she didn't touch the envelope, he added, "Security can escort you to your office to retrieve personal items." "Just my coat," Rowan said. The contractor led her back to the stairs. On the bridge, she stopped. Below, the koi drifted. One of them, pale gold, surfaced, mouthed the daylight, then slipped under its own reflection. "You're not going to make this weird, are you?" The contractor said, not unkindly. He looked like he'd prefer a day with no weirdness at all. "Not today," Rowan said. They rode the elevator down. No one else got in, a kindness or a superstition. In the lobby, the revolving doors delivered visitors to and from the weather. The world smelled like new rain on hot concrete. Rowan slipped into her coat, felt for her phone, and checked nothing at all. She didn't need to. If Helix's leadership had just violated the spirit of Sections 4, 2, and 9, one of Latticebridge's agreement, as she believed they had, the loom had already begun the shift it was born for. Some changes took hours. Some took seconds. None of them were visible like a movie breaking. They would sound like a desk worker in Wilmington muttering, "That's odd," when an export manifest asked for a second signature before releasing a container to a carrier whose insurance had quietly lapsed. They would sound like a regional finance director in Rotterdam seeing a glowing yellow band around an automated payment and finding herself unable to click approve without adding the 3 words her boss hated most: manual review required. Rowan walked 3 blocks to a cafe that had never tried to look like a cafe in Paris. She ordered an Americano and the kind of pastry that flakes too much and leaves the evidence all over your dignity. A woman in a blazer on the next stool talked about school pickups into a headset, and a man by the window wrote numbers in a ledger with a pencil so short it made Rowan's fingers ache to look at it. She opened the paper notebook. The first page showed a box diagram she'd drawn ages ago as a joke, a rectangle labeled chaos, an arrow, then a rectangle labeled less chaos. She had never believed in control. She believed in less chaos on the days you could earn it. She wrote 3 names down the margin: Noel, Bianca, bored. Under Noel she wrote, "Do not punish. People drown quietly when you tell them the boat is fine." Under Bianca she wrote, "Performative certainty, watch for cap table pressure." Under board she left the space blank because she did not yet know what the board knew or what it pretended to know. Her phone vibrated once, not a call, not a text. A neutral notification from a neutral app that looked like a weather service and was not a weather service. Aegis Loom, Attestation Mode armed. The words did not cheer her. They were the sound a buckle makes when it clicks. Rowan closed the notebook and did the impolite thing she was raised not to do. She stayed at the table after she'd finished her coffee. She waited the length of a second cup without ordering it. When the barista wiped the glass near her with the swift kindness of someone telling you it's time to go, Rowan stood. On the way out, she passed a corkboard with business cards pinned to it. Piano lessons. A dog walker named Persephone. A handyman who fixed weird barn doors and, in smaller font, also normal doors. She smiled without meaning to. She walked to her car, slid behind the wheel, and didn't start it. She thought of the first night the loom had surprised even her. A westbound shipment of temperature-sensitive biologics, a humid corridor in late summer, a customs office that had switched to a new software vendor without telling anyone downstream. The loom had compared 5 timing signals and the tone of an emailed OK from a midnight shift supervisor, a tone, not a word, and had slowed the release by 6 minutes. 6 minutes for a cooler packed to be fully charged. 6 minutes that turned an almost loss into 200 vials reaching a children's hospital cool to the core. No one sent a thank you. None was required. That was the job. Rowan turned the key. The engine caught. She merged with the noon traffic and let the city carry her. At a red light, she looked in the mirror and met her own eyes. She did not look victorious. She looked like a person who had forgotten to buy milk. She looked like someone whose mother had taught her to send condolence cards in her own handwriting because grief deserved more than a template. Her apartment had a view of the river if you leaned the right way and forgave the office buildings for being in the way. She left her coat on a hook and her shoes arranged as if she might need to run in the night. She put the paper notebook on the kitchen table beside a bowl of peaches that were threatening to go from perfect to regretful in hours. She powered on the old desktop tower that still had a scratch on the side from a move 7 years ago. The screen, when it woke, didn't show anything cinematic. It showed a dashboard she had built for herself and no one else, a private place where the loom spoke in plain language because with her it was allowed. Attestation Mode. Active. Scope. Payment authorization, export release, vendor onboarding, compliance reconciliations, post-factum corrections, unaltered. Guardrails, consumer safety non-negotiable. Driver payroll non-negotiable. Audit trails immutable. Civic compliance, full, Rowan scrolled. A note blinked in gray, observed variance, biometric overrides requested, 0. Good. No one had yet tried to jam a square key into a round lock. Her phone buzzed again. She had turned off most push notifications in 2019, but she still allowed one group of messages through unfiltered. Deliveries, outages, and public status pages that companies pretend ordinary citizens never check. A public Helix page, the one for customer experience, had just changed a dot from green to experiencing delays. The paragraph underneath said the kinds of things paragraphs say in such moments. We are aware. We are investigating. This does not affect your security. The loom did not enjoy irony because the loom did not have a sense of humor. But if it had, it would have enjoyed this specific sentence. This does not affect your security. It didn't, that was the point. Rowan's doorbell rang. It was the kind of sound that makes you freeze if you grew up in an apartment where knocks were either neighbors with sugar or men with clipboards. She looked through the peephole. The hallway magnified Noel's face into a fishbowl. Rowan opened the door. I shouldn't be here, Noel said, and then burst into an apology without commas. I should have said something. I should have stood up. I should have. Breathe, Rowan said. Noel breathed. She held up a bakery box, as if arriving with pastries could repent for every small cowardice she'd just committed. I brought you the lemon squares from downstairs, she said, and then, because she was brave in the ways that matter, if not always in the ways that show, what did you build, Ro? Rowan's first instinct was the habit that had kept people safe for a decade. Don't say the quiet part. Let the loom do its work and leave human beings out of its mythology. But she looked at Noel's hands, still sugared from tearing the top off a paper bag too fast, and she chose a different habit, teach. I built a loom, she said. It listens for lies. When people in power forget that everyone downstream bleeds like they do, it tightens. Noel blinked and Rowan could almost see the gears. Relief, I didn't imagine it. Fear, we're going to get blamed. Calculation, how can I help without losing my job? Loyalty, I owe you so much I can't name it. Am I in trouble for being here? Noel asked. I don't put people in trouble, Rowan said. I put systems in shape. Noel laughed a small, guilty laugh. The vendor portal asked me for a second attester on a routine credit check. It's never done that. Bianca said to push it through. I told her we needed a second attester. She lifted her chin like a boxer touching her own gloves. She didn't like that. Good, Rowan said, and meant both parts of it. Good that the loom had requested the extra set of eyes. Good that Noel had found her own spine at the same moment Helix had asked to borrow it. Noel shifted the bakery box between her hands. They'll say you sabotaged us. They'll say whatever they need the room to believe, Rowan said. But the loom isn't sabotage. It's the seatbelt tightening when the brakes fail. You're withdrawing it like flipping a switch? Noel's tone held hope and dread. Rowan shook her head. Withdrawing isn't the right word. Attesting is. It keeps the records honest and refuses new promises that would make the honest records a lie. Bianca will call in outside people, Noel said. She'll want someone to take a wrench to whatever you made. She'll find a loom and ask why her wrench doesn't work on thread, Rowan said softly. They stood in the small kitchen, two women who had held night shifts together while the world slept, listening to a system that never slept ask them questions in the only language it knew. Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? Noel set the bakery box on the table. I might get fired, she said, and tried to make it a joke. It didn't stick. You might get promoted for telling the truth, Rowan said. Either way is a weather report, it changes. Noel nodded. She wiped powdered sugar on her jeans and made a face when it smeared into a constellation. Can I tell the two people on my team to stop forcing green lights? She asked. I know that's not the phrase, but that's what it feels like. You can tell them to honor the yellow, Rowan said, and to write everything down. Ink remembers what people forget. Noel exhaled like someone who had been underwater too long. Okay. She looked at the screen over Rowan's shoulder and then looked away like you look away from a hospital monitor when you don't know how to read it and don't trust yourself not to try. Okay, she said again, and Rowan understood the second okay meant thank you. After Noel left, the apartment's silence changed shape. It wasn't empty, it was attentive, like the hush in an audience that has decided it will let the next sentence land before it decides how to feel. Rowan returned to the dashboard. A new line had appeared. Exceptions. 7 flagged, 7 deferred, 0 overridden. Notes: 2 outbound wire requests rerouted to manual escrow pending bank insurance at a station. 1 export release paused pending second signatory. 3 vendor onboards held for mismatch on beneficial ownership declarations. 1 internal credit memo flagged for unapproved shortcut language. Rowan pressed her palm lightly to the desk as if she could feel the work through the wood. She didn't want anyone to stumble. She wanted everyone to notice the floor. On the corner of the table, the paper notebook was open to a fresh page. She drew a line and wrote a title over it. What happens next that isn't about them? 1. Call area, ask about the community clinic's freezer in case our courier stipend needs to expand. 2. 3. Draft plain language explainer for drivers who will hear system issues and miss a paycheck rumor, preempt that. 4. 5. Cross-check the Attestation Mode's driver pay carve-out. Shore it up again, no loopholes. 6. She tapped the pen against the margin. When the notification tone chimed, single, neutral, she didn't jump this time. Public filings. Helix Meridian Investor Relations page posted clarification on infrastructure transition. Small font. Consumer safety, unchanged. Payroll windows, open, protected. Rowan closed her eyes a moment. She thought of her father, who had driven a truck until his knees wouldn't give him stairs for free anymore, who used to say, when a company tells you to trust them, read the receipt. She thought of the ridiculous name she'd given the loom the night she'd registered Ladicebridge while eating cereal from the box. She thought of the space on her notebook where the word board had waited without a note beside it. She thought of the lemon squares getting stale. She opened her eyes. There would be knocks on the door and emails that sounded polite and smelled like smoke. There would be a letter from a law firm that confused vowels with power. There would be a person in a tidy suit who would try very hard to convince a regulator that a loom was a lock. There would be a meeting in a high room where someone who had never balanced a forklift on a ramp would say the phrase proprietary footprint like it was an absolution. All that was later. Now, a system did what it said it would do when the table shook. It steadied the cups. Rowan took a lemon square, bit into it, and let the sugar detonate against the roof of her mouth. She chewed and wiped her fingers on a napkin and went back to her desk. The window reflected her face over the river. She didn't look like revenge. She looked like maintenance. Somewhere in a warehouse office in Kansas City, a clerk read the words "manual review required" and rolled her eyes and asked for a second pair of eyes and didn't know she'd just told the truth out loud at work for the first time that year. Rowan watched the lines on her screen settle. The buckles were tight. The thread held. The next part would not be gentle.